Our story begins in the middle of a dark night, when none of the inhabitants of the city could even imagine what disaster would soon come to them. At that moment, when no one expected it, the silence was broken by a beam that rose high into the sky. On this day, the gate that connected our world with another was opened. The air trembled, hot lightning broke the peaceful life of citizens, waking them from warm dreams. From the depths of the portal began to emerge creatures that no one had seen before. Dozens and hundreds of them approached, and the rage in their eyes desired only the death of people. Different in appearance, small and large, on paws and with clawed hands, they invaded the earth. Humanity fell into despair, because no one was ready for the onslaught of these ruthless and bloodthirsty monsters. Each of the people had a burden on his soul, and hopelessness was visible in his eyes. But at one point everything changed. In contrast to monsters from another world, our heroes appeared, Constellation. Tall, with shining eyes and sophisticated forms and weapons that no one had seen before, they came to help people. Constellations are objects given to us to improve the power of people chosen by them and give them new, supernatural abilities. And if it weren't for them, humanity would have no way to resist them, and the planet and people would be destroyed. These heroes who defended the planet, armed with new powers, will be sung in legends. But in the end, not all constellations are good, not all wish humanity well. Some of them are evil, insidious and ready to do anything to use a person for their own purposes, and then throw them away as garbage. Our hero woke up from unbearable pain, which covered his whole body and tore it apart, as if he was being burned from the inside with a red-hot iron. Huang Jaemin found himself in a cave that he thought was just empty and foggy. Instead, it turned out to be a poisonous mist that was slowly killing him. He thought about the fact that there was no information about this in the report, and if it were not for this mistake, the situation would have turned out differently. The body again experienced unbearable pain and he coughed again. The colors slowly floated in his eyes, becoming dimmer and dimmer, his strength was quickly leaving him and his chances of survival were approaching zero. Various confused thoughts swirled in his head, but only one was clear: that he was really going to die now. He thought he was just an F-class player, but he also wanted to save the world, or at least one person. He wanted to be like his parents, who also saved people. Thoughts again floated in his head: is he going to die so terribly? In the end, the sword god of Central Plains doesn't help him anymore. There was a message: sword god of Central Plains is having fun, that F-class player will die as F-class player. His smile was insincere, his fangs glistened in the dim light of the cave. Huang Jaemin was extremely angry. With the last strength he started shouting insults at him. Veins stood out on his face, but he was not going to give up. Our hero shouted that as a sword god of Central Plains can call himself more important than him, showed the middle finger and shouted another insult. Instead, the constellation began to get angry and scroll through the words that our hero said and slowly seethed with anger, because before that no one dared to speak to him like that. He went through the insults he could say in response, thought how he could hurt him. Suddenly sword god of Central Plains raised his head in surprise, because it began to lighten in the cave. The light seemed to break through the ceiling of the cave, through meters of stones, clay and sand. At the last moment, he even got scared. The light, which finally gathered all its power, fell on this constellation, burning him, his dark thoughts and all the secret desires that sooner or later he would bring to life. Huang Jaemin felt as if a new constellation touched his mouth, why he was extremely surprised. Suddenly, a magical cloud appeared in front of him, which sparkled with millions of stars, shimmered with colors and radiated a bunch of different whimsical shades. Dozens of messages showered on our hero. He tried to understand what each of them means and what is its meaning. He wondered what the constellation wanted to tell him, because in this state he could not see any of the messages. The last forces were ready to leave him. He invested all of them in order to finally read the message, but nothing came out. He thought again that this was his end. And when the heart practically stopped beating, some inner force gave him the last opportunity to read the text that the new constellation wanted him to live. Of course, he thought, it won't be that easy. The next message said that the new constellation wanted him to live if he was willing to start over. He thought that he was ready for it, if only it were possible to do so. The heart could no longer be heard, the breathing almost stopped, the eyes began to turn pale, but on his last breath he barely audibly whispered that he wanted to live. At that moment, the constellation spun, sparkled, and began to flutter. A light of a different color appeared, even stronger than it was before, as if there was no cave and tens of meters of obstacles for him. It began to break through more and more inside, as if it had incredible strength. Suddenly everything around rumbled, blocks of stones fell from the ceiling, which miraculously did not touch Huang Jae-min. An incredible force grabbed him, pulled him into a whirlwind. He experiences such a feeling for the first time. The force lifted him higher and higher, and that was the last thing he remembers from that night. He opened his eyes in surprise, the sudden rush of adrenaline made this moment incredibly long. The heart was beating at an incredible speed, Huang Jae-min was sweating, his whole face was covered with cold sweat, he grabbed his chest, checking if it was intact, because just a moment ago, a dangerous gas, which he mistook for fog, was burning his whole insides. He looked around. The first thing he saw was the window through which the light flooded the entire room. For a moment, our hero was lost where he was. What kind of place was this, Huang thought Jae-min, and literally in a few seconds he realized that he was sitting at home. Everything is familiar, the refrigerator and washing machine are in the same place, the kettle and everything else is in the same order, the furniture seems to be the same as well. After thinking for a second, he grabbed his phone. With trembling sweaty sleeves, he tried to turn on the screen. He was very worried, so it happened the second time. Our hero looked at the date and suddenly he was overwhelmed from head to toe. Is this the day when I first met the constellation and woke up? Our hero shouted. Am I back? Huang thought Jae-min. He exhaled, collected his thoughts. Daylight added a little confidence that now there will be at least a little peace and he will be able to be one with himself. Suddenly, the same constellation, which looked like a cloud, appeared in front of him. He felt fear again, but this time he instantly came to his senses. The message said that the new constellation says that he has indeed returned. There was silence, and he was surprised that a holographic message appeared in front of him. Huang Jae-min asked if he really went back 3 years. The constellation looked at him silently. In the next moment, he wondered why this constellation was next to him. He cursed at the cloud, grinding his teeth. It seemed as if he had forgotten why he was alive. You! Our hero shouted. The constellation momentarily lost its balance in the air and was clearly not ready for such a turn of events. Huang Jae-min was not in the best mood and was seething with anger. You sword god of Central Plains, right? Huang exclaimed Jae-min. He shouted that he didn't care if he came back or not. Also he added that you started being proud after giving such a crap-like system. And at the end I asked if he still thinks that the F-class should die like the F-class? Immediately there was a message that the new constellation was raging and saying that he should not compare it to the puny creature that has the right to be called a constellation. The next message made it clear that the new constellation wanted him to understand that she would never become something as low as a sword god of Central Plains. Our hero laughed, because he was quite skeptical about these words and in general about whether it is worth listening to this cloud constellation. In the end, he decided to trust her, because he began to remember the events that happened to him not so long ago. Our hero asked who she is and what is her name. The message said that the new constellation shook its head and said that it was not important to what Huang Jae-min asked what is important then. The cloud flashed its little eyes, thought, and in the next moment began to fly around the room. Messages poured in one after the other with different phrases like what kind of place is this, that the pigsty is cleaner than this room, that it will make him sick, that it is extremely dirty. And in the end, that is a new constellation complains about these conditions in which Huang lives Jaemin. Our hero was embarrassed by these words and thought that the new constellation quarreled too much. He looked at the family photo and thought that it reminded him a lot of someone depicted in it. When the constellation finished its verbal assault, Huang Jaemin finally asked what he wanted for a long time, but the tirade did not give him a cloud, namely what is her name. Our hero was quite surprised after the constellation's smile and words that they do not need to be introduced to each other. He mentioned that usually the stars tell their names and also tell about their real personality, but this one does not want to talk about one or the other. The next message said, that the constellation is saying that it is not supposed to do this but Huang Jaemin is an acceptance. It went on to say that a new notification system had been installed and the name of the constellation had been redacted. After reporting that the name is Legal Guardian was edited, our hero seemed to have lost his speech, because the constellation began to reincarnate. He could not understand what was happening. The constellation was spinning as if it had turned into a small tornado. Everything around glittered, sparkled and shimmered with colors. This action gained momentum, increased its speed with such force that it was beyond calculation. Suddenly, the constellation began to take shape, hair became visible, big beautiful eyes, the stars formed into a magical shape that he had not seen before, and the message said that the constellation's name was Song Hyeonsuk and it welcomes our hero and adds our son. Huang Jaemin opened his mouth in surprise. I froze in one place, thinking and trying to find words, although now it was happening again in my head, as if dozens of hurricanes were rushing by and overturning all my thoughts. In the end, after standing there for quite a long time, he was able to at least minimally put his thoughts in order, but he still couldn't close his mouth because of the surprise and all he could ask was she his mother. Song Hyeonsuk is the name of his mother, who was an S-class player. He remembered her, always beautifully dressed, with beautiful gray hair and a battle shield. A message appeared that the constellation Song Hyeonsuk scolds Huang Jaemin for not remembering what his mother looks like. Our hero still could not understand how this could be and whether this is really his mother. He was very surprised. He said that it is very strange and it is very difficult to believe that it is his mother after reading this message. Disbelief was still visible in his eyes. Song Hyeonsuk protested, shaking her fragile semi-transparent head. After a short thought, he said that he needed indisputable proof that it was really her and not someone else who wanted to deceive him. The constellation was very surprised, but agreed. She also added that she was happy when she saw their family photo, because those times have long passed and it was their only window into warm times where they could gather together. This photo was taken at an amusement park where he spent fun times with his parents. On Huang's face Jaemin was boundless happiness and joy. The message said that he always wanted an ice cream before entering an amusement park. Exactly. Ice cream, said our hero. And at the same moment I wondered how she managed it. Also the constellation Song Hyeonsuk laughs and says that she always remembers him wearing a diaper when he was 7 years old. Next is Song Hyeonsuk began to tell various stories from his childhood. She laughed heartily when he ate the soup and began to sneeze when the algae got into his nose. The stories continued to go on and were given, by the dozens, and maybe by the hundreds. Finally, he listened to all of them and became very excited. He still could not believe that it was her and Song Hyeonsuk convinced that he should stop doubting her. He started to say something again that he didn't want to be direct, but at the same moment he fell silent. The next message said that Song Hyeonsuk folds his hands and says that he can tell anything if he still have more to say. But he did not lie and asked the last question, which should finally calm him down, and said that when his mother came home, she always made his favorite food. The next moment, the message said that now mom will send him a small gift. The constellation's face was surprised, but at the same time it was happy. A bunch of seals appeared in front of him, which shimmered with different colors. Lightning fell from them and conjured particles of something special. Huang Jaemin was amazed, because this is his favorite toast with honey, which he loved so much and wanted to taste all the years that he lived alone without his parents. Such a beautiful ruddy toast was lying in front of him. The honey reflected the sun's rays and became a little sun, and next to it was a message that it was from Mom with love. On one side, it was toasted, just perfect for Huang Jaemin. He took a bite and the taste seemed to spread all over his body. He was happy with every cell of his whole body. He thought it was unsurpassed. Pupils dilated with pleasure. Now he was completely covered with emotions. His eyes filled with tears, because he finally realized that this constellation was really his mother. He was holding a toast in his hands and his emotions were overwhelming him more and more. The constellation lit up with joy. Song Hyeonsuk said that she felt bad because she could not appear much earlier in her son's life. Tears were pouring from his eyes. He missed his mother very much. He kept saying that he missed her. He was ready to spend a week with her, or maybe a month, or maybe a year, to tell her everything that he couldn't before. The message said that Song Hyeonsuk also shed a tear and missed her son very much. And, in the end, she added that the tears should stop, which the son agreed with, because it was quite strange for him, since he had never cried before. Song Hyeonsuk again asked him to stop crying, because this was not the life he wanted to start anew. The constellation also added that over time he should become an S-class player. Huang Jaemin was amazed and scared at the same time, because he was not ready for such a thing. Song Hyeonsuk said that she has certain plans for him to reach the heights. She smiled and waited for her son's reaction, to which he asked in surprise what exactly she had come up with for him. She smiled again and said, making our son an F-class player into an S-class player, step 1. The astonishment of our hero changed to even more, while the mother kept absolute calm. She said that she was scolding him and wanted him to stop doubting himself, because everything will work out for him and there is no reason to worry. The main thing is just to get a hold of yourself and start working. So, our hero decided not to waste time and started the preparation that Song Hyeonsuk told him about. The truth is, she didn't clarify at first what her plan was to prepare Huang Jaemin for level up. Therefore, everything started with every day, and at the same time important matters. Such as cleaning the table, washing the floor, taking out the old garbage, and one of the important tasks was to clean the bed. He coped with everything with a perfect score. The new message cheered up the tired boy a little, because it said that Song Hyeonsuk was glad that he had completed his first task. In turn, he did not expect that cleaning would be the first mission. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he asked his mother how she became a constellation. Cleaning tired him a little, he stood there gasping. She smiled because she was ready for this question. Song Hyeonsuk wrote down and said that it is all thanks to the fact that everyone remembers her as a hero who is included in the Hall of Fame, where not everyone who fought against the forces of evil could enter. She shrugged and said that even though she was a constellation trainee, she was more successful and faster than his dad. After these words, Huang Jaemin was very surprised, because he did not know what happened to his father. He asked if Dad had become a constellation. He suddenly opened his mouth. He was very interested to know how his fate turned. Star Song Hyeonsuk raised his chin and said, "Did you forget who your mom and dad were? His parents were S-players class and gave their lives to save the whole world from a monster whose power could neither be measured nor classified. Gathering all their strength, they struck the final blow, defeating evil." Huang Jaemin thought that apart from everything, they should have passed the qualification to become constellations, because becoming one is quite difficult and one needs to pass more than one check. The message said that the constellation is sad because she has been waiting a long time to be able to see his dad. To which the hero replied that Dad probably also had a hard time and definitely missed both her and his son. Having encouraged him so that Huang Jaemin would not be sad, she decided to give him a gift so that the cooperation would continue even more fruitfully and he would have a certain incentive to work. Before that, seals appeared out of nowhere, the air became electrified, lit up with the colors of the sun, and a ball appeared from the light, which looked like a setting sun. It sank lower and lower to the hands of our hero. The ball glowed, and hundreds and thousands of stars fluttered around it, which seemed to form a system together with the vitamin inside it. The shiny ball, apart from all the properties, looked pretty good and probably didn't taste the worst, but Huang Jae-min had little faith that it could be so useful. Constellation was outraged that he thinks that mom can do something bad and give him not what he needs or something that can harm him. He immediately corrected himself and added that he did not mean that, but wanted to say that this ball does not look like an ordinary vitamin. He asked if it would definitely not harm him and if she was not deceiving. At the same time, something very bad was happening outside the window. Something was approaching the ground. Mom smiled gently and said that he would immediately feel and understand the effect when he tasted the vitamin she gave him. Her smile inspired hope that everything is for the best. And the unknown body was approaching the houses with great speed. The red-hot body hit the residential quarters, the sound reverberated through the city districts. The force of the impact was enormous, debris and plasma flew in all directions. Huang Jae-min said that he believes her and will eat the vitamin like he did once in the past. He shouted that he was eating it and threw it into his mouth. It was a little scary, but he swallowed it quite quickly. Immediately after he ate the vitamin, a fragment of gigantic proportions flew into his house. Sparks and fragments flew. The thunder was so strong that it was impossible to stand nearby. He landed next to our hero and he was very lucky that he did not fall 2 meters to the right. He got scared and began to brush the dust away from himself so that he could breathe a little easier. The shrapnel did not touch him, which was also extremely lucky in the situation he was in. Everything around was overturned, the order he created turned into ruins, as if a hurricane had passed. Pieces were falling from the ceiling, everything was strewn with various debris. He breathed heavily, but the mess was not the worst. Huang Jae-min was much more interested in what happened and what caused this cataclysm. Star Song Hyun-suk said she can't help but be very angry, realizing that all the work they did to clean up has gone to waste. She was sad because his apartment had never been so clean. The guy asked if she doesn't think that this is not something to think about now. He said that he could not breathe because of the large amount of dust. He still hasn't settled down, but his breathing is getting harder and harder every time. Huang Jae-min was going down the stairs to get out of the house, which could collapse every second. He coughed, he could barely see what was happening next, but he confidently walked on. He recognized them, because they had been here before and attacked the city. He called them big, hideous, with bloodshot eyes. There were few words in the world to describe what kind of monsters they were. But at the same time, they had inhuman strength and size, and therefore were quite dangerous opponents. He said that he was glad because he did not die after the battle with them. He knew how dangerous they were and that it was better to deal with them as soon as possible. He filtered through the teeth that sword god of Central Plains, that bastard. What is this bullshit before debut? An image of that constellation appeared in his head. He hated him, because of him he got into a situation in which he almost died. He moved away from the cliff saying that he will not fight them again and that it is dangerous to stay here, it is necessary to go down to the vault as soon as possible. His face was serious, there was no place for jokes on it, because you can't joke with such rivals. Suddenly he turned his head to Song Hyun-suk because she wanted to tell him something. She said that she was delighted with the kind of performance he put on. He did not quite understand her, because he was a little in a bad mood. Song Hyun-suk also added that she is cheering you to finish them nicely, saying this is a great opportunity. He rubbed his head with his hand and replied that they would kick his ass and that would be the end of it. Song Hyun-suk started arguing and told him not to miss his chance to get even with those monsters, and he replied that he told his mother again that he is not an opponent for enemies. Breathing became a little easier, the dust settled a little. He approached the wall and said that he will show Song Hyeonsuk that he is no match for the monsters. He gathered all his strength and hit the wall. The blow was quite strong, but no changes in the wall were visible from the outside. It both stood and continued to be like a monolith. Hwang Jae-min said that player F-class cannot break a stone similar to this one. He seriously wanted to prove it to her, because he was sure of his own rightness. Suddenly the wall crackled, a hole began to appear, fragments fell. He backed away from the wall because he was afraid that it would collapse him or something else might happen. The wall crumbled, blocks of stones flew in all directions, the wall crumbled before his eyes. He was just silent and looked at what was happening. The constellation, on the contrary, rejoiced at this and seemed to be listening to the symphony of falling pebbles. He was surprised, his eyes were wide, because he did not know that he was capable of such a thing. Before that, Hwang Jae-min had never done something like this, it was the first time. Song Hyeonsuk shrugged and said that he became healthier because he ate her vitamins. He stood with his mouth open and could not fathom what he would be capable of now. She also added that he should be focused and use his mana, a resource that powers players. He collected all his spirit, strength, focused on the main thing that is now, on the task of protecting people and killing enemies. A blue halo appeared around him, he rose into the air and power poured through him, he felt it with every cell of his body and was ready for battle with every second. He had never felt this before, as if a current was passed through his body, but this feeling was extremely pleasant, warm and gentle. He couldn't understand what it was from the ghouls that got such gigantic strength. He clicked his fingers and formed an X sign. A bright sign appeared in front of him, on which letters began to appear one after the other. Hwang Jae-min didn't understand what happened and what kind of sign was blinding him. He said that his abilities remained the same as before, but at the same time, in a strange way, the power was incredible. He began to wonder if it was because he had eaten the vitamin that his mother had given him. She winked at him and said that she will answer everything only after he defeats all those who threaten people from below. Hwang Jae-min thumped his chest and said he was ready to fight. He was full of determination, the recent fear disappeared and he prepared to fight back. Mom gave him confidence and he was finally in a fighting mood. Meanwhile, the giants were destroying everything around, the street was filled with smoke and only fires and braziers were sources of light. People, scared to death, ran away and screamed. Indescribable horror and fear of death could be read in their eyes. Meanwhile, the monsters kept getting closer. People shouted, "Where is the one who will save them, whether someone will come to help?" One of the fugitives, a young woman, got caught and fell, her shoes flew off, and she herself was lying and begging for help. Tears flowed down her face. The giant came closer and a smile appeared on his crooked lips. He raised his stick and was ready to strike the poor girl. She was trembling all over, fear bound her, so she could not move. She begged for mercy, but the monster obviously did not hear them. Tears streamed down her face, she begged him not to kill her. However, everything was unsuccessful. The monster raised his hand, brought the stick above his head and was ready to destroy the girl. Although the armor on him was sloppily made, it shone in the lights. He roared, and the girl screamed terribly from helplessness, covered her head with her hands. At the same moment, a stone flew into his head, he took it away and put it to the side, from where the blow was inflicted. A second later, the next blow, but already of gigantic force, was delivered to the groin. The monster did not have time to come to his senses after the first one, and the second one puzzled him even more. He covered that place with his hands, the pain went through tons of muscles. The girl sat and was happy to all the gods that she got a few more seconds to live. At the same time, she was no less surprised at the monster. Constellation looked at her son with pleasure. Hwang Jae-min told the girl to run to the shelter and he would take care of the enemy. In his hands, he picked up another stone and was ready to strike. Song Hyun-suk is speechless if the monster really beat Hwang Jae-min last time. Our hero confirmed that it was really him. And this is the monster that defeated him last time. Constellation said that now this is the reason to take revenge on him 100 times, because the monster deserved it. The guy gave an affirmative answer and rubbed his fists. A fire lit up in his eyes, because now he had new powers, with which the monster would no longer be a serious opponent. Song Hyun-suk told her son to smear the monster on the ground, and the boy said that he understood the order. He clenched his fists, took the appropriate stance and went on the attack. He was rapidly approaching the monster, which was reeling from the previous blow. The monster made incomprehensible sounds, held his groin and stomach. Literally in a fraction of a second, Hwang Jae-min was already nearby and delivered the first blow to the jaw. A green liquid spewed from its mouth, the monster began to lose its balance. The impact was so strong that the monster's bones could be heard cracking. He fell to the ground, hitting his head hard on the asphalt. The fall thundered down the street. Our hero continued the series of attacks and stepped on the enemy's face with the next step. The enemy opened his eyes, wanted to do something, but could not keep up with the lightning attacks of our hero. Rija summed up that it was a very good shot. The guy stood on top of the monster, realizing that he had to finish the job, that is, the enemy had to be eliminated. Our hero raised a stick, because it was best suited to the role of a weapon, because there was nothing else at hand. He easily lifted it up, waved it, checking its weight. He was surprised because the stick was like a feather. Hwang Jae-min thought that she was completely light. And he wondered if this was another effect of the vitamin that his mother gave him. Suddenly a roar was heard from behind. Out of surprise he and the constellation turned around to assess the situation. There was a new monster behind them. Suziria said that there are too many of them here to finish. The boy waved his stick, assessing the number of enemies. Boy picked up another stone and told his mother not to worry, because now he is not as weak as he was before. He threw a stone, prepared a stick for battle and said that before he could have been beaten by them, but not now. Another monster rushed to the attack with a roar, waved a stick and approached our hero. Sounds came from the mouth that scared everyone around. Our hero threw a stone, brought a stick over his head and said that now it will not be like before. Everything around was bursting with his power, and he was ready to liberate his city from enemy invasion. The stone broke the monster's knee, he roared terribly in pain, clenched his fists and continued his move on our hero. The monster kept getting closer and was only a few steps away. Hwang Jae-min didn't wait and struck. He jumped on the monster several meters in height. He gained strength and lowered the stick on his head. The last thing the enemy saw was a piece of wood that kept getting closer to him, increasing its shadow. The impact was so powerful that it exceeded the sound threshold. The air swelled, the hum echoed on the street. The monster sank into the ground and flew several meters away from the battle site. Song Hyun-suk said that it is better to use bare fists than weapons to destroy enemies, because it is much more effective. Will it be faster and better than a stick, thought our hero. He thought it would be more exciting when the battle would take place at close range. He threw a stick with gigantic force at another monster. Hwang Jae-min successfully hit the enemy in the back, as a result of which he was immobilized. The others paid attention to the boy and were ready to attack. Their eyes were glowing with anger, they were pouring with blood. They roared and wanted blood. Hwang Jae-min shouted for them to approach him and not be afraid. Suziria cheered for her son and was ready to help in everything. He concentrated again, gathered strength, which began to flow through his body even more. Blue tongues, full of strength, flowed near him, twisted around our hero. The sign said that the boost skill was activated and the power was increased by 5% for 10 minutes. Power flowed through his fists and gathered to deliver the final blow. Anger at enemies increased mana, the desire to finish everything as soon as possible forced to think of a plan to do everything right. He shouted that they will all be defeated. Mom, his constellation, his talisman, stood behind his son, gave him even more confidence, strength and desire for revenge. So the battle continues. Our hero, full of determination, is ready for battle. He shouted for them not to wait, but to come closer. Dozens of giants were approaching, the ground rumbled under their feet. As if dozens of tanks, they roared for kilometers. The eyes glowed, full of hatred for all living things. With each step, there seemed to be more and more of them. And Huang Jaemin stood still, his fists, full of energy, were like titanium. But at one moment they were all hit by his blows, which rained down one after the other. First, second, third, and so on. All of them lost their balance, fell defeated, could not come to their senses for a certain time. Few were ready to continue the fight further. The blows were of gigantic force, so the giants could not continue the fight for a long time. He struck again and again, the bones of the monsters broke, the force passed through them and inflicted even greater wounds. The last of the enemies were defeated, there were dozens of them, bodies covered the entire street. Constellation Song Hyunsuk rejoiced at the success of his son, and our hero felt the strength with every part of his body, which still hasn't disappeared. Suddenly he felt that there were still enemies behind him and said that there were several of them. He quickly turned around, took a stance, so as not to receive unnecessary blows and to be able to attack the enemies. So Kita was gaining momentum and rapidly approaching Huang Jaemin's head. She seemed to be singing a symphony as she cut through the air. Despite the fact that it belonged to giants, it was quite well made, so this added to its danger. Perfectly sharp, with a pattern. Our hero managed to dodge the axe, but it was very dangerous for him. Powerful feet shook the ground. The giant, who weighed several tons, was furious with rage, as all his allies were defeated. Bigger than the others, much more evil, he was in armor that covered his hips and shoulders. His axe was taller than most people and weighed several hundred kilograms. Therefore, he was among them the most formidable opponent. However, Huang Jaemin was not impressed by the appearance of the giant. He continued to stand motionless, his attention sharpened, he was ready for any tricks from the giant. Not a drop of fear was visible in his eyes. He was merciless, so he asked the monster if he was the chief among them. He did not wait for an answer, did not wait for an attack from the giant. Instantly gaining speed, he approached the enemy. He seemed to be floating in the air, moving smoothly from side to side so as not to catch the monster's blows from the side. Jumping up, he struck the first blow at the monster, who lost his balance, but did not drop his weapon. The monster roared menacingly. The next attack did not make itself wait. Hit him well in the jaw. The monster roared, finally came to his senses and began to block dozens of blows with his hands. Attacks poured in from all sides, from the left, right, and above. However, he did not manage to block absolutely everything. It was not easy at all, almost unreal. At one point, Huang Jaemin found himself behind the monster. He could not expect this, so he made a surprised sound. After the attack, our hero prepared to launch a new attack to finally gain an advantage over the enemy. Boy shouted that the monster would pay for destroying someone's city. He will pay for taking the souls of innocent people. His words sounded convincing and sincere, full of hatred and anger. He just wanted to finish the matter and not see this ugly peak again. Weed swung, gathered all his strength and delivered a crushing blow to the back. Huang Jaemin punched the back of the enemy, a crunch broke the silence that appeared around. Everything around was filled with green. The monster stared, no more sounds came out of its mouth, only a thin trickle of liquid poured out. Everything was burning around, the fire was crackling and these sounds were covered only by the sounds of blows that followed one after the other. The giant wheezed, but was still alive. Huang Jaemin held him by the corner to aim better. Finally, the giant fell without strength. Evil eyes gradually became empty and glassy. A puddle formed around the monster, in which he was sinking little by little. Our hero was standing on the giant's body and breathing slowly. His hands and clothes were dirty. Meanwhile, the constellation Song Hyeonsuk jumped for joy and shouted that the mission was accomplished. Our hero was surprised that he did all this. Of course, he assessed the situation, made a decision, but in a state of stress and adrenaline, the events of the past hour simply fell out of his head. The only thing he clearly knew was that now he became much stronger than he was before. He looked around and the only thing he thought about was that he did it all. Dozens of bodies lay there, all of them already breathless, which indicated that the mission was accomplished. The street on which he lived turned into a battlefield, but Huang Jaemin emerged victorious from the battle. The constellation rejoiced and shouted that it was cool and the guy did a great job. As the sounds of the battle died down, people who were now safe began to come out of their hiding places. Everyone around clapped their hands and rejoiced. They were glad that they waited for their savior. Glad Huang Jaemin didn't let the monsters destroy more people and buildings. People shouted and asked who this guy was. And Huang Jaemin stood and did not know what to do, because this is the first time he is in such a state of mind. The guy was confused and just stood there silently. People were happy to have such a powerful player in their city. Some were delighted to see the battle so close. Everyone filmed a video, made broadcasts on social networks, took a photo of the savior as a memory. Huang Jaemin stood and thought that this is it, the feeling of glory. And he liked this feeling. He felt cool, because people were grateful to him. And also this feeling was strengthened by the thought that all these people remained alive. He stood all blushing, and thought in his mind that it was time to stop enjoying the glory. But at the same time, he was so pleased to stand there, as if he were the hero of some cool movie. Song Hyeonsuk said that she is happy and proud of her son. He thanked. Now he wanted to hear from his mother what she had promised. Huang Jaemin wants to hear the story about the vitamins his mother gave him. A message appeared that the constellation was happy to give access to its son. She was glad that everything ended well and he managed. In the next message it was said that all the information about vitamin full of love from is now open. The message said that it is a pill made by powdering 10,000 years old ginseng then grows at the back mountain of the Hall Og Honor. It does not only give a great inner strength to a martial artist who consumes it. After consuming, all the starting stats increase by 4 times. Our hero thought that he read something wrong, because the information shocked him. He asked 10,000 years old ginseng that I only read in Murim books. Suziria snorted her nose and asked what was so strange about a mother feeding her beloved son with ginseng. To which the boy replied that nothing except that she is the only one who feeds her son with ginseng, which is 10,000 years old. Suddenly he realized that those vitamins increase all indicators by 4 times. It was the first time Huang Jaemin had seen such an item capable of such a thing. He wanted to look at the information about the player, because he could not believe what he saw and what he heard. Before that, a table appeared where all the information was visible. In the table it was said that strength increased by 18 units, intelligence by 12, endurance by 21, dexterity by 15, and the skill of strengthening refers to E-class_basic. It was also said that vitamins increase all indicators by 400%. He lit up when he saw that it was true. Huang Jaemin thought and said that the total number of indicators is 90, which means that these are the indicators of the candidate in S-class. And he also added that just by looking the starting stats he is no different from a new S-class player. Then our hero realized that in addition to such skills, he can still get a weapon, so he asked his mother if she could give him a weapon that belongs to S-class. Constellation shook her head and told him not to be funny and not even think about it. She was more serious than ever before. She shook her head again and said that she loves her son, and she does not want to spoil him like this. In response, our hero wanted to start proving something again, but kept silent. Suddenly my mother fell silent and he asked what happened. She was not in a good mood. She turned to him and modestly said that not anymore has God coin, because she spent all of it on buying vitamins, so now she doesn't know what to do. Huang Jaemin didn't know what it was and asked if his mother could collect them again. And also asked if it is similar to Bitcoin. As a result of the explanations, he understood the only thing that to collect them, you need to work, because other aspects were too complicated. Suddenly their dialogue was interrupted by a siren sounding from an armored car. She flew into the street at high speed and stopped abruptly. The car was black, massive and was intended for special tasks. He called them bullies because they did not rush to the battle site. He also asked what was the name of the guild who was in charge of the safety of their village. Mom told me from the side that in their time these people were doing something useful. The car drove closer to the scene. People began to whisper, because it was a volt. Phrases passed between people that they were not superfluous, but now they were too late. Some were against their arrival. Some did not know why they were protecting the peaceful people. At that moment, the armored door opened, and a man in official clothes started to come out of it. He quickly climbed out and quickly stepped towards our hero. The man had fair hair, a neat suit and a well-groomed appearance. He was very young, but serious at the same time. People were talking about how they could trust this organization, and our hero stood silently and had no emotions about this man's arrival. He contemptuously asked what happened. It seems that he was not very interested in what was happening here. I also asked our hero if he is the cause of the mess that happened here. He came up more closer and said to Huang Jaemin that there are some business ethics that the people of industry must follow. Then he contemptuously added that he saw that our hero was not a novice. There was not a single note of respect in his voice. Huang Jaemin had the thought that he should kick his ass. Instead, he said that he could not even think that the word ethics would come from the mouth of such a person. There was a message that the constellation could not keep calm and had a nervous expression on its face. The son asked what happened. He asked his mother not to stop him. And asked if she wants his son to be treated like that like this. Song Hyun-suk explained that if he hits that bad person, it won't be good because many people are watching. This can spoil the attitude towards our hero. He agreed, mother was right. Huang Jaemin asked the man if he wanted to thank him for saving people and doing a lot of work for the other players and the organization. And in his mind he asked himself the question whether that man is really capable of banal things like gratitude. The fair-haired man got angry and asked what he was talking about. In response, our hero joked that, looking at him, it was too big a deal for that man. A smile appeared on the boy's face. Huang Jaemin approached the man, patted him on the shoulder and said that he was sorry, but he could take care of himself, and he didn't need to worry. And also advised to go home as soon as possible, because now is the weekend and you need to rest. The man became even more angry and began to demand the name and guild of our hero. He threw several insults, but they were not very audible. He looked contemptuously at the boy, and he smiled in return. Huang Jaemin said that he woke up just a few hours ago, so he doesn't have a guild yet. The man was surprised because he was not ready for such a thing. He asked about the time of awakening and also asked if he was a beginner. Huang Jaemin said affirmatively, and also added that they needed the help of players from the association to help dispose of the remaining monsters. If they are not removed in time, they can become the cause of diseases and the spread of infections. The guy asked if the man in the suit knew that the residuals of a monster all belong to the person who caught it. In response, the man jokingly called him a super novice who appeared out of nowhere. And the guards behind whispered that although he woke up recently, he showed a high level of abilities. The man gave Huang Jaemin the organization's business card. After that, the man said that he was not in the mood, so he apologizes. He rubbed his head, as if he was really sorry that their acquaintance did not start the way he wanted. Also, the man in the suit said that if he joins the association, they will be glad to see our hero among them. The guy wondered if it was true, and also thought that this man's mood changes extremely quickly. The man pointed to the piles of bodies behind him. The giants were lying in different directions, they had to be taken away from there as soon as possible. He said that it was a great talent to destroy a group of orcs single-handedly right after waking up. Also said that Huang Jaemin should be B grade or A grade or even higher. Our hero stood and thought. And with a light movement of his fingers, he tore the business card into small pieces. He released the papers from his hands, the wind carried them further down the street, scattering them further and further. Our hero asked why it became so windy. The man stood motionless, clenched his fists. Obviously, he wanted to hit our hero. He called the boy names, raised his fist and prepared to hit. At the same moment, Huang Jaemin shouted that he was being attacked, that an ordinary city dweller was ready to be beaten by a player. What was going on? He screamed and asked for help, otherwise he would die. The man stopped punching, retreated. Asked if Huang Jaemin was really an ordinary citizen. He advised me to tell such fables elsewhere. In response, our hero said that he is not currently registered as a player. Huang Jaemin raised his hand and said that there are too many people looking at them and they should not start the show. The man filtered out his resentment, his clenched teeth seemed to crack with anger. He was shaking with rage, but tried to show his emotions as little as possible. Nevertheless, it did not turn out too well and people saw everything. The man suddenly turned around and said that this was not their last meeting and they would definitely meet again. He quickly walked to the car and disappeared. Meanwhile, people continued chanting different phrases, shouting thanks and saying that our hero is the best. The crowd was loud and did not want to quiet down. He called the Players' Association. I asked if it was the right number and told what happened. And also asked if they can deal with the bodies of monsters that have been lying on the street for a long time. They asked for the address, so he gave it. Song Hyun-suk watched the situation and was fascinated by how Huang Jaemin behaved. She shone with her thousands of stars and radiated happiness. Song Hyun-suk blushed, because as a mother, she can't help him, and this makes her very sad. She assured her son that she would contact close friends of the constellations who could lend her some god coins. It would be very appropriate, because the situation that arose today can happen again at any moment. The guy began to say that there is no need to do this, because now you can live without borrowing money. But Huang Jaemin did not have time to agree on what he wanted. Song Hyun-suk suddenly dissolved in the air and said to wait a little. She disappeared like a shooting star. Fast and sudden, but at the same time beautiful and elegant. He thought why she hastened with this decision. The guy looked around and thought it was time to brainstorm how his first round went. How did he move, where did he make mistakes, was it possible to act better and faster? It was also important to understand whether it was possible to avoid the amount of destruction caused by the monsters. He looked at his own house, in which there was a giant boulder. The building was smoking and in a state of emergency. The windows remained broken, the smoke rose higher and higher. Huang Jaemin regretted that he lost his home, but at the same time, he was happy that he was alive. He stood and was lost in his own thoughts. Suddenly someone's hand touched him and asked if I could have him for a second. He turned and saw that someone was addressing him. Saved not so long ago were standing nearby. Sweet, beautiful, and now also all in blush, they wanted to thank him. One of them was fair-haired, tall. The one behind her is shorter, with brown hair. The first thanked our hero for saving her brother. The brother asked to convey that if it wasn't for Huang Jaemin, he would have died. Huang Jaemin got confused, started to say that this is his work and everything is fine, there is no need to thank them. The girl invited him to a treat, our hero refused and thanked. They started talking to each other. They tried to convince each other on their side. Huang Jaemin said that nothing was needed. The girl insisted that she would still treat him. Suddenly, our hero was struck by the thought that he had already seen this girl. He wondered if it was really her. She was beautiful. But why she was so familiar to him, he could not understand it. While they were talking, two people in suits approached them. Dressed in black, with black glasses. They were serious and their appearance showed that it is better not to joke with them. They quickly moved forward and reduced the distance. He told the girl to forgive him, because representatives of the Players' Association had come. Suddenly she shouted to him to wait a minute and take her phone number and other information. She insisted that he call her, because she wants to treat our hero. The letter said that she was thanking her for saving her brother. It was also said that she is a player in Mad Dog Clan. The girl's name was Jiun. The number was also indicated. After he read it, he suddenly understood why the girl's name seemed so familiar to him. He said that it was definitely the girl, but he was not mistaken when he saw her. Sweat broke out on his face when he remembered her. It was called the viscous demon Li Jiun. She looks like such a sweet lady, but how could she take the side of evil? He remembered her 1 year ago. A monster that sat on the bodies of people, covered in blood. Her bloodshot eyes radiated rage and lust for the death of people. Her weapon was deadly. There were few blades in the world that could match her blade's sharpness. She was a Lhasa to death and her aura radiated the energy of evil and destruction. Jiun said that they should meet and left, waving to our hero. He looked at her and did not understand how such a beautiful girl could become a demon. He wondered what could happen to her in a year. How could she turn from a cute girl into a bloodthirsty monster? The men asked if he was the one who gave the information about the incident with the orcs. Huang Jaemin replied that yes, it was him. The guy thought that he should stop thinking about the viscous demon Li Jiun for now. You should talk to those two and go home peacefully. They asked if he had a player's registration card and asked to show it. Huang Jaemin replied that he woke up this morning, so he hasn't received it yet. They were wary and asked if he really woke up today and found himself alone. They were imperturbable, no emotion was visible on their faces. The men asked if he single-handedly destroyed this horde of orcs. They walked a little between the bodies, quickly examined them, determined the nature of the injuries, the approximate time of death. They doubted the truthfulness of his words, because the one who wakes up does not have such strength immediately. The men said that most likely he is an illegal hunter who woke up and did not register. Huang Jaemin noticed that the hand of one of the men was glowing very strangely. The gauntlet emitted lightning and looked very dangerous. He thought that it was a player suppression item equipped with a taser function. Men wanted to catch our hero. They thought that our hero is a criminal. One of the men said that the number of crimes among players who have just woken up has been steadily increasing for a long time. They asked our hero to follow them. Song Hyunsuk appeared with borrowed money and said that she was amazed by what she was seeing now. She gloomily concluded that she met only one old man, so she was able to borrow quite a bit of money. After that, Song Hyunsuk asked who they were and why these men got into an argument with her son. The guy replied that they consider him a criminal and want to arrest him. The men looked at each other and said that they saw him talking to the constellation. Suddenly one of them lunged and attacked our hero. He moved with great speed, his hand almost caught Huang Jaemin. The boy was lucky because he managed to jump away from the attack. A sharp release of adrenaline gave an opportunity to react. They said that they will have to deal with him if he does not want to act in a legal way. For the first time, an emotion appeared on the man's face. It was an emotion of anger, he was not friendly. Song Hyun-suk said that there is one thing that can erase the target's memory. Song Hyun-suk added that if he decides to use this thing, they will be left without a god coins. The guy objected and said that it was a waste of money for such a small purpose. He thought that he could deal with them without help. Hwang Jae-min said okay, he agrees to the arrest, but he wants to make a phone call first. The men agreed and said that he should be nearby, because they would watch over him. He dialed a phone number, and they watched him carefully and kept their eyes on him. Hwang Jae-min said he wanted to call his guardian angel. He was waiting for that person to pick up the phone. Finally the beep stopped and he heard a voice. He brought the receiver to his ear and listened to what he was told. He began to say his name and whether the person on the other end of the line was surprised that he called after such a long time without communication. And he explained that he just woke up today. The voice on the other end was angry and exploded. Single words came from the receiver that the voice was absolutely not happy with his call. Hwang Jae-min made a smaller sound and began to explain the situation. I asked him to calm down and listen to him first. Later he explained what happened. Told him to change those staff underscore. Hwang Jae-min said he would turn on the video call to prove everything to those men. The man on the phone said that he cannot live peacefully because of him. Every time he calls, something bad happens. Hwang Jae-min showed them his phone. This call gave him some hope that he would get out of the water dry. At the beginning, the man could not understand who he was talking to and asked the boy who he should talk to. Hwang Jae-min started to smile and said that he is the president of the association. The men were clearly excited when they heard this. And the boy thought that it would be cool to have powerful connections so that he could get out of such situations unscathed. Our story continues elsewhere. This is the headquarters of the Players Association. A large building dozens of floors up and even more floors down. No one knows exactly her planning and secrets. This was done in order to preserve the secrets she hides. It was daytime, the sun illuminated the glass building and made it majestic because of the shadow that covered the quarter that lay near the building. From the office of the current president of the association Lee Tae-ho there was swearing. He called our hero reckless and asked if he really had an extra life. He did not understand how someone could wake up and immediately think that D would win class orcs. Lee Tae-ho was sitting at his oak desk and was extremely angry. It seemed that he would burn now. Even the secretary had not seen him so angry for a long time. And Hwang Jae-min stood in front of him and listened to what the president said. The boy was silent. Obviously, he was indifferent to the words of this man, but he could not just turn around and leave, because he was his guardian angel who once again saved him from a dangerous situation. His gaze was directed somewhere far away. And Lee Tae-ho continued to scream, veins stood out on his temples. He said that when Hyun-suk looks at him from heaven, he must be cursing with words like that he is an extremely reckless fool. Meanwhile, the secretary warned the president not to stress so much, because then his hair would start to suffer. He calmed down a little, but now switched to the secretary and started shouting at her that he had asked her many times not to say anything about the hair. She was embarrassed, blushed and apologized. And the boy thought that the president really couldn't stand it when someone mentioned his hair. Hwang Jae-min noticed that the constellation is laughing very hard and says that the man's hair has become even thinner than it was before. She couldn't stop laughing and said she was looking for a cure for her hair in Hall of Honor underscore. The boy was silent and waited for the continuation of the conversation. He thought that was at the time when German Don showed up. He remembered the moment when his mother took him to this man. She instructed him to be with this uncle and play with him. And she promised that she would return. She hugged her child, looked into his tearful eyes and asked him to be brave. Lee Tae-ho stood and watched this picture with sadness. Song Hyun-suk told her husband to take care of her son. Her eyes were penetrating, and her hair was blowing in the wind. She gave the impression of a strong woman. The man looked at her with a sour look, because he knew what to do even without her instructions. He was not very sentimental, so he wanted the farewell not to be too long. Song Hyeonsuk went on a mission. And Hwang Jae-min and Lee Tae-ho stood and waited until Mom disappeared over the horizon. The boy had a tearful face, but calmed down a little, because he was not alone. Although the man was too serious, he inspired trust. And the boy knew that his mother would not be friends with anyone, so he could be calm. Where he was in the top of the news, pulled him out of his memories. Everyone was talking about the guy who was able to single-handedly deal with powerful enemies in less than 10 minutes. The announcer said that the news is spreading. An outbreak in Seoul Gwanak, gu. The announcer also said that an unknown player defeated a large number of orcs in a very short time. Lee Tae-ho exhaled. It was clear that he had calmed down and returned to normal. The man said that the boy is now a top star and asked if he had asked the boy to behave more quietly and not attract too much attention. He decided to ask our hero the name of his constellation. Lee Tae-ho was very interested in how Hwang Jae-min was able to destroy a whole pack of powerful enemies right after waking up. The guy was not happy about that. Lee Tae-ho did not believe him. The boy tried to prove that his constellation was his mother. Therefore, he decided to act differently. He threw his hand behind his head and said that his name was the Sword God of Central Plains and asked if Lee Tae-ho had ever heard of him. The man thought about it, asked if it was really him and said that this constellation must be a very honorable constellation. The guy got angry after these words. He could not understand why this evil constellation is called honorable. If he saw him somewhere nearby, he would gladly pay back for the way he treated our hero. The man shook his head and said that he is definitely Song Hyeonsuk's son, as he will also become a strong player. Although he hoped that the boy would never become him and live an ordinary life. The boy decided not to pursue this topic and thought that he needed a license from the Players Association to enter the gate. And also thought that Lee Tae-ho will try in every possible way to prevent him from doing it as usual before. And above all, he does not want to allow this. The boy said that he knows how Lee Tae-ho feels about his fate. And he does not want him to stress because of the boy's actions. And so, Hwang Jae-min wants to offer him a good deal. The man was wary of the word about prosody, because it usually did not end in anything good. Hwang Jae-min said that the association has a special training program called Cyber Field. He asked to pass the test with his help. He was quite serious about it. The man said that this was quite strange to hear, since he had just woken up and was already wanting to use a secret training program. And added that it would be better to just fight orcs. The secretary apologized and said she thought it was a very bad idea. She said that he is not yet ready for this level. Lee Tae-ho looked at her and said that she is very worried about Hwang Jae-min. Lee Tae-ho muttered something, but apparently agreed. Lee Tae-ho looked straight into the boy's eyes and told him not to complain later if something went wrong. Hwang Jae-min was over the moon with happiness. Our hero sat in a special capsule and waited for instructions. He was in a large training room, which was all made of iron and other alloys. There were dozens of thick cables connected to the capsule. He looked away into the void and asked if our hero knew the conditions of testing. After all, if he passes, he will become a new player, but if he loses, then everything will not turn out in the best way for him. Lee Tae-ho asked if Hwang Jae-min had read the instructions and guidelines. And Song Hyeonsuk shook her head and saying that repeating what has already been said is a sign of aging. The boy pulled the helmet on his head. He became similar to the hero of films about space. The helmet was quite comfortable and very futuristic. He fit more comfortably. Our hero said that he read the instructions a little. The capsule began to close. There was no way back. The heart began to beat a little faster. He was determined no matter what. Hwang Jae-min was going to a new stage in his life, to become a player with a license. Lee Taeho stepped back and wondered why the boy only read the instructions a little. And asked not to make him cry. So the capsule closed.